We're taking yet another trip way down memory lane and looking at some of the best video games of the year 2002. As you know, we're covering every year from 2000 on. This is our list for 2002, of course, and so many games released during that year, so we're looking forward to hearing yours down in the comments as well. But let's get started off with number 10. We're going to start off with Timesplitters II, and man, do they not make shooters like this anymore. This was a wacky game that was very aware of its wackiness, and it embraced that wackiness. You were fighting across different points in time, trying to stop Timesplitters from messing up history. So you would find yourself fighting in all different points in time, each with their own set of weapons. So when you were in the Wild West, you were using Western guns, and when you're in the Mafia-era Chicago, you'd be rocking a Chicago typewriter. It had a 10-level long campaign that could be done totally with co-op. Back when split-screen co-op was a normal thing that would pop up in a lot of games, and it had a really solid campaign, making the co-op that much more fun and enjoyable. The multiplayer was a blast as well, and it supported up to 4 players locally, or up to 16 players when using System Link. Timesplitters II was received very well, with most publications having nothing but nice things to say about it, which makes sense, seeing that most of the devs at Free Radical Design had actually worked for Rare previously, who had developed GoldenEye. So these devs knew what they were doing when it came to making good first-person shooters. THQ Nordic actually picked up the rights to Timesplitters in 2018, so maybe we'll get to see another game from this franchise, and I really hope it keeps on with its wackiness. At number 9 now, while Warcraft 3 has certainly been in hot water lately thanks to Blizzard's not-so-great remaster, we don't want people to forget that in 2002, Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos was absolutely fantastic. Of course, it had that great RTS gameplay pretty much in its top form. You know, you explore the map that is initially unknown, you set up areas, you attack and defend, and you manage resources. Managing units was fun and challenging, and there was just a lot to this base game. 4 playable factions that all had their own nuances. With those factions, you took control of level-upable, I don't think that's an actual real term, hero characters in an adventure through Azeroth. And the best part, the story was actually compelling and interesting. This is where, for a lot of folks, the Warcraft lore was at like final form. You have Arthas, you have Thrall, you have the Orcs, the Night Elves, etc., etc. All this cool shit went down in both awesome cutscenes and surprisingly interesting in-game dialogue. There were some memorable moments for sure, especially with Arthas. Multiplayer was also fully fleshed out using solid matchmaking for the time and an earlier version of Battle.net. The game was obviously a huge hit for PC fans and went on to sell an insane 1 million copies in the first month alone. At number 8, man, I really miss getting weird Star Wars games on the regular. Yeah, with Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars games are good again, but back in the day, we got so many more that were so much fun. Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast is one of those games. It just gets so much right. It gave us Kyle Katarn, who I still think is one of the coolest Star Wars EU characters. It also told a surprisingly great story, telling the story of a Jedi who almost fell to the dark side, and in an attempt to not do that, has cut himself off from the Force and becomes a mercenary. This game had great combat as well. First and foremost, just like the first game in the series, Dark Forces, there was some excellent FPS combat, and then it all changes once you get your Force powers and lightsaber back. Then it turns into a pretty solid melee combat game. And while swinging your lightsaber does look and feel goofy and hectic, it's actually a ton of fun. We aren't the only ones who feel this way either. This reviewed pretty well, and you see it on the top of a lot of best of Star Wars games list. I'd love to see Star Wars games like this get made again. Fallen Order gave us hope, and all we can do now is run with that hope, and hopefully something comes from it. Next up at number 7, we're talking about Hitman 2 Silent Assassin, and for many people, this was their first time actually hanging out with Agent 47, seeing that this is the first console release for the series, with the first game being a PC exclusive. Not much has changed from this one to the new Hitman 2, you still had numerous ways to finish your mission, with a ton of different ways to take out your target, different disguises to wear, and multiple escape routes. It was actually a huge improvement compared to the first one, which was fun, yeah, sure, but it wasn't very easy to get into, and it had some really rough patches. But with the second one, a lot of fixes were made, better AI, smaller levels that were more straightforward, which were changes that were desperately needed. It was just so inaccessible and it made it not fun to play sometimes, so it was nice to see those changes come through in the second one. It was Hitman 2 that added the ranking system as well, which really added to its replayability, and going back to try and hit Silent Assassin on each mission was difficult, but also extremely rewarding. Moving on to number 6, we have to talk about Splinter Cell. We had gotten stealth-based gameplay before, but Splinter Cell just handled it in such an awesome way that it makes this series stand out as one of the best stealth game series ever. You may have looked like a scary special ops dude, but you were more of a modern-day ninja, really. Sam Fisher was extremely acrobatic, with you being able to mantle walls, do split jumps in the hallway, and hang from ledges and pipes. They gave you all the tools you needed to be a stealthy boy. While you did have weapons, ammo was limited, and the game really set you up to make stealth the way to play. It looked amazing as well. There was a big focus on shadows and lighting, with the player needing to hide in the shadows and use it to get around, thus leading to the dev team really dumping time and effort into making sure this game had killer lighting. It also had a surprisingly great story as well, one that kept you interested, and you got to play as Sam Fisher, who is so cool. I'd definitely say he's right up there with Solid Snake in being a top tier sneaky boy. Yeah, the series got more and more into action in the later entries, but the first few entries were all stealth, and it all started with Splinter Cell. And at number 5, Metroid Prime is one of those Nintendo games that has accumulated an almost cult-like following. People lose their minds over this one, and it seems like it's for good reason. This and Metroid Fusion, which released on the same day, were the first entries in the series in 8 years. Metroid makes up half of the Metroidvania genre, and the previous releases were all side-scrolling Metroidvanias, but with Metroid Prime, the camera angle was switched up and it became a first-person game. But it isn't necessarily a first-person shooter, it's still very much a Metroidvania. Playing as Samus, you would unlock new gear and abilities which would allow you to reach previously unreachable areas. Environments were lonely, mysterious, and intriguing. The game still has a very unique vibe that we haven't seen matched even to this day. In 2017, Nintendo actually announced they were making Metroid Prime 4, originally being developed by a brand new studio, headed by the original series producer. Then in 2019, Nintendo announced that development had been restarted and the game was handed over to Retro Studios instead, who made Metroid Prime. And I don't know about you, but I see that as a win. Now, at number 4, we have Soul Calibur II. I'm not good at fighting games, and I really feel bad about myself when I play them, but that doesn't happen with Soul Calibur 2. One thing that really sets it apart from other fighting games is the emphasis on weapons. It just made it a tad bit more interesting, as did the characters. There were some really cool, unique character designs in the game. This is also where the Soul Calibur series started to bring in characters from other series. There were 3 versions of this game: the PS2 release, the Xbox release, and the GameCube release, each one having its own unique character. So you got to play as Link, Spawn, or Heihachi, depending on what console you got the game on. This is probably the coolest part of the game for me personally, and I remember going over to certain friends' houses just to see these other characters on the other platforms. Moving back to how the game plays though, coming from the first game, there wasn't too much of a change control-wise, which was actually quite fine, seeing that the first one controlled pretty well, and if it ain't broke, why fix it? At number 3, we have Super Mario Sunshine, aka the GameCube one, also aka one of the most underrated Mario games. The crew takes a vacation and journeys to the island of Delfino, a unique, new tropical setting. Of course, some bad stuff goes down and Mario is forced to save the day in an absolute banger of a Mario game. You have the open environments, you had all of Mario's moves likely drilled into your brain from Super Mario 64, you had the cool jumps and flips you know and love, and this time, you're not collecting stars, but shine sprites? That was all well and good, but you also had the water jet backpack thing, aka FLUDD, or Flood. This was an incredibly fun addition that allowed Mario to blast away his enemies, getting around faster and elevate himself, and most importantly, clean the environment. A Shadow Mario has been running around the beautiful tropical locations and covering it all up with graffiti and messy paint everywhere. And it's your job to take care of it all. The backpack and all of the moves that came with it, the kick-ass level design, and the absolutely stunning, for the time, graphics and music really helped make Mario Sunshine a special game. We're still hoping for a remaster or re-release or sequel of this one because it still really holds up to this day. At number 2, for a lot of people, Morrowind was their first Elder Scrolls game, and it was one hell of an experience. I mean, its open world was mind-blowing for back then. There were real-time weather effects, a day and night cycle, and it had a bunch of varied environments. At the time, I had never seen anything like it. There was so much to see and do. And while it was set in a fantasy world, it was a very different fantasy world. It wasn't all pretty trees and big castles, but more of weird huts, bugs, and elven stuff. This was kind of jarring for me at the time because I was totally expecting your run-of-the-mill fantasy stuff, and that's very much not what you got. Morrowind also handled its whole mission structure differently. It's not like Oblivion and Skyrim, where you would follow a quest marker, get your quest, kill whatever the quest giver wants you to kill, then follow the quest marker back, and you're done. No, instead in Morrowind, it was way deeper than that. You had to actually invest time into learning about the lore, geography, people, and Morrowind's politics to actually grasp what to do next. You actually had to pay attention and listen to what people were saying to you and read everything carefully. This made for a very different player experience than the one you get with later Elder Scrolls games. Compared to a lot of newer games, and even some older ones, it's a very unique experience that really does stand out on its own. Sure, it looks like a bunch of mud today, but this game is a legend for a reason. Finally, at number 1, we have to talk about Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Just a year after GTA 3 slapped the world in the face with how awesome it was, Rockstar spoiled us and took us on a trip to Vice City. Vice City took everything that Grand Theft Auto did and really built it up. They rolled with giving it a movie-like narrative, this time being heavily influenced by Scarface and other crime films. Vice City also took the ridiculousness of GTA 3 and made it even more ridiculous. I feel like this is where they really figured out their humor and would carry across every other game leading up to GTA 5. It was here that Rockstar proved that not only could they nail a good story and making a living, breathing city, but that they could also nail a time period, which they would do again with San Andreas. We also got new types of vehicles like motorcycles, boats, and airbound vehicles. GTA 3 may have been the one that started it all, but Vice City was the big step forward, the first of many. Before we head out, we have some quick bonuses for you. First up, 2002 was a big year for Ratchet & Clank because it's when the first game in the series launched. It was legitimately funny, had some really fun combat, and a bunch of weird guns to play with. And this game went on to spawn so many more entries and even a movie. Then we have Sly Cooper and the Thievis Raccoonus. Before Infamous and Ghost of Tsushima, Sucker Punch was known for their Sly Cooper series, and Sly Cooper and the Thievis Raccoonus was the first game in that series. It had a really cool film noir feel to it that was pretty unique at the time. Also, how fly does Sly Cooper look? I mean, just look at him. Eternal Darkness, the game with a huge cult following, was also introduced to us in 2002. Battlefield 1942, yet another World War II shooter, but this one truly was the foundation for what the Battlefield gameplay is today. Fun, creative, shooty bang bang on big maps. And then we have Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, and Frontline. This is when Medal of Honor games were in their prime. Cinematic FPS action, incredible battle scenes, and an amazing score. And those are some of the best games from 2002, but we want to hear from you, so meet us down in the comments and let us know what you think. We know that you guys definitely have some games to add to this list, and we really want to know. As I'm sure you already know, hitting that like button really helps us out, and if you're new here, subscribing is a good idea, because we put out videos like this every single day. As always, thank you for stopping by and taking the time to hang out with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time, right here on GameRanx.